Hello, dear friends. This is the beginning of a new series of videos about extremely interesting and unusual events which will be upon us probably within a couple of years. I will publish everything now, although it is a bit too early for some people to take it as seriously as they should be taking it. But the thing is, if I publish it when everything starts unfolding, then those who may wish to hear it will probably see something like this on their screens. So in this first episode, I will concentrate specifically on the timing of the events of the dramatic main transition to the new beautiful age of peace and knowledge. Because I did lots of research lately, I found out about a few other extremely reliable prophets which I have not included in the previous videos, and the information from them is amazingly precise and accurate. And combining that new amazing knowledge with what we already know and what I have already published, it turns out that it is extremely likely that the pivotal changes will start some, let's say, 2 to 7 years from now and will last another 7 years or something of that range. This is the main backbone of the events of the timeline, and I'm using biblical terms because most people are familiar with this type of terms when they speak about the end times. But before we even cover the events as such, a simple question: how many of us will actually live to the end of these tribulations? According to the Bible and Utrok Vyacheslav, very small fraction. According to Islamic prophecies, 1 person in 1,000. According to the medieval tantric mystic from Orissa in India, 2-3 people of every village. It is possible, and I think even highly likely, that in our case at least somewhat more people will survive, if not much more. First of all, because of the vision which I mentioned in this video, and the second reason are some remarks made by Alexander Paramonov, the videos about whom I also think are very important, and those who wish to have a complete picture of what is coming should see them as well. So what Paramonov explained is that because this is the last night of the Svarog, the biblical scenario, which is the Akashic record of these times, will not be followed very precisely, as it happened in the previous cycles of the time, in the previous yugas, when everything played out exactly as expected and the result was more or less standard each and every time. Now, because it is the last yuga of the cycle, there will be some deviations from the standard scenario. But still, he said that a lot of the biblical timeline will happen, and that the dark forces in general will have a tendency to stick to this timeline, because in the previous yugas it turned out well for them. They had good harvest, if we use a biblical term. What is harvest? The harvest is the number of souls which they will manage to groom and drag to the dark side. That's their reward. And also there will be also angelic harvest. That will be those souls who will use these extremely powerful energies present at the times when cycles shift for purification, exactly as gems which become transparent and very beautiful and pure when they are exposed to intense heat. So how exactly it's gonna be different this time? He didn't give details in terms of the events, but he said that the scenario will be adjusted in such a way that the people will be given more opportunity to get purified. He said that divine will constantly adjust this scenario in such a way that more people will get purified, which doesn't necessarily mean that it will be easier. Actually, it can mean that it will be more difficult, because to get purified, we will need to go through dramatic events. We have shown that we did not do it while it was still peaceful. And to summarize, I would expect in general slightly less deadly calamities and wars, but not necessarily less difficult tests for everybody personally, while we loosely improvise on the biblical timeline. Actually, I call it biblical just because I assume that most of my viewers will be from Christian countries. In reality, in the Islamic prophecies, they have the exact same timeline, and they even have a bit more detail, because the language of the Quran and the Hadith, their holy books, is somewhat more straightforward and understandable compared to the Bible language. While the Bible, well, half of the text is like, wow, so now what does this mean? Especially when it comes to events, you can barely understand what is happening, let alone when it will happen or has happened. As explained in this video, the link to which you can find in the description, basically Islam and Christianity are one and the same religion. And because the secret sects, which for example edited the Bible hundreds of years ago, could not distort the Islamic branch of this one single religion as much as they did with Christianity, that is why the Muslims today, they're awaiting the second coming of Jesus collectively much more than those who consider themselves Christians, since the second group mentioned, they don't have much information about it, and in most cases don't even believe in it. Christ is the most mentioned person in the Quran. Muslims, they always say, may peace be upon him every time they mention him, which is an ultimate sign of expressing reverence. The biggest chapter in the Quran is about Jesus and Mary. The only lady mentioned in the Quran by name is Mary. The name which they use, Isa bin Maryam, not only means Jesus, son of Mary in translation, but also sounds very similar to the very Slavic name used in the Orthodox Christianity, Isus Sinna Maria. That's the Slavic and again the Arabic, Isa bin Maryam. Most Western people have a very mistaken overall impression of what Islam is. The media has convinced us that it is just a fanatic religion. And when they are forced by the circumstances to mention, for example, how much they know about Christ and how much does he matter to them, instead of telling facts, they play with the emotions of the people. Yeah, those Muslims, they have some sort of Muslimized Jesus. That's the expression I actually found. And after they mentioned the Muslimized Jesus, they actually put even more negativity, because they know that already people are negative towards Islam, mistakenly negative. They feed that negativity even more with some carefully crafted lies, and at the end don't even tell them the facts. So why there is less information about the second coming of Jesus in the Christian sources compared to the Muslim? Well, the question is not really why did they remove and edit the Bible in the Middle Ages. Actually, it will be more appropriate to ask how come there is any truth left after their editing. And the answer is that they had to leave something, because there were Bibles already in circulation at that time. So if they would replace the entire story with, let's say, tales about kindergartens of hippopotamuses and crocodiles, the population would not buy it. So the monks who were told to refashion the Bible at that time, they had to come up with an end product that closely resembled the Bibles in circulation, which eventually they destroyed, but everything was gradual, exactly like what they do with Google Maps nowadays. With every new edition, they remove more and more important stuff, and it is done very gradually and stealthily. And that's why they had to leave part of the real story. Other reason is that it wasn't the devil himself sitting in a chair and editing it. It's like nowadays they employ employees to do it. Like Google hires workers and they are told what to do. So the way they edit the maps, as I've been showing in the older videos, they do stupid things because not all the people who were paid to do it did it properly. I don't know for what reason. Did they hire unqualified staff, or the people who were doing it did a bad job on purpose because they didn't like what they are doing? I don't know. But in the Middle Ages also there was another situation that they were editing prophecies about future times that they don't understand properly. So many of the descriptions, when we read them now in the Bible, we know very well what is meant by these prophecies because we see the rest around us. But the people in the Middle Ages could not imagine the full situation the way we see it, and that's why at places they simply did not understand, and whatever they did not understand, they left it, assuming that we may not understand ourselves when we read in modern times. And we find much more information in the Islamic sources about Jesus just because they did not get any malevolent tampering. I don't know if there were any attempts. I'm not aware of such attempts. But even if they were not as successful as with the Bible, where they eventually managed to replace the supreme God with another entity. And when they did so, they met very strong opposition at the time they did it. The people said, what kind of God? This is not the God of Jesus. He's cruel. Why are you adding it? So that's why I put a lot of endeavor in making this timeline correct. And that's why I based it not only on the Bible and the Islam, combined with other reliable sources, meaning prophecies which have happened already partially and thus they are confirmed, or being made by people who have already proven that they have special abilities and special vision. The most prominent of which is Irmaier. Irmaier was a simple, respectable villager from Germany, and although his prophecies are mostly local, the detail and the accuracy is just mind-blowing, and also he is an absolutely verified prophet. His accuracy is just stunning. He was also involved in actively helping in court cases during his life. And again, he would describe what actually happened and who did what with absolute precision. And that made it very easy to catch many criminals because they knew exactly where to look for. And after the investigation, they were always absolutely shocked about the precision and accuracy of his visions. I think he's simply number one. Despite the difficult to read text, the overall validity of the Bible as a source of prophecies cannot be denied. Just too many of them have happened already. And the same is true for the Islamic sources about our times, how they describe them. The simple nomads of the desert will be making cities with buildings as high as the neighboring mountains. These are, of course, the skyscrapers in the Arabic countries. And the prophets of that time really must have seen it because they even described the women that were wandering in the marketplaces of those skyscraper cities. They described them as dressed and at the same time not dressed. At least in Dubai, it is very common to see Western people, Western women wearing mini skirts and all that in the marketplaces of the towers. And many other details, like, for example, that we appointed the lowest robbers and criminals amongst us to be our leaders. How can you guess that? I think this is extremely difficult to conceive of for people of those times of the prophets, when it was just obvious that the strongest and most honorable man must be the leader. And of course, in the Islamic sources, they have hundreds of historic predictions which have come true. I cannot include all of this in this video. It will be just too long to watch. It will never end. So all my sources are verified. And the way that it is going to play out is that probably for a couple of more years, it will be more or less as it is now, with the intensities of the various calamities, both natural and man-made, slightly increasing. And then all of a sudden the tribulation will start in one day. Meyer says people will be actually sitting out in the pubs in Europe, and they will be shocked when they will see the tanks on the streets marching all the way from Belgrade to Italy. We are now approaching the beginning of the tribulation, which will be 3.5 years and will be followed by the Great Tribulation, which will be really hell on earth. And if you want to be prepared and the tanks on the street don't surprise you, you have to follow the news and wait for the time when there will be a civil war in the Middle East. In the beginning, it will look like a completely local thing. 3 princes will quarrel for the riches of somebody important who died. I'm not aware of any other verified information of particular events that could be expected before that happens. Although I saw in other very detailed Christian end time timelines, other events, but when I spoke to the people who made them, they didn't really have any evidence whatsoever from the Bible that this is the exact timing of the events. That's why I did not include them in my timeline. The things that are indeed clearly mentioned in the Bible, because there is some clear information in the Bible, are as follows. Israel becomes a nation, completed. The Jews regather in Israel, completed. And they start organizing the building of the third Jewish temple. They take all that very serious, and years ago they have already organized this temple institute. And reading each and every syllable of the old text very carefully, they have already made all the preparations exactly as they are required by the old text. For example, there are detailed information of the sacred vessels and how the temple should be built, and the exact location they calculated with great precision. Full detail can be found on the pages of this Temple Institute website and YouTube channel. They have appointed the priest already, which comes from the exactly specified lineage as it is described in the old text. Everything is ready. They will start construction at any time. The temple should be functional towards the middle of the Great Tribulation. For the tribulation to begin, only the preparations need to be made. And that is absolutely completed. The only thing which we have not completed and comes from Islamic sources is this civil war. Somebody important will die, and then 3 princes will start fighting and gathering armies because they won't be able to divide the riches of the person or of the state, if he was a head of a state, this important person who dies. It's not clear if they will be 3 brothers or not. Irmaya also gives some hint. Maybe it is the same event, maybe not. He says that everything will start when an important person is killed. It's the 3rd one, and he sees everything is plotted. They are assassins. He even describes them. It's a paid political murder to instigate all that, and is a 3rd one. He says it's not clear if it is the 3rd attempt to kill that important person, or it is the 3rd important person killed, because earlier this year we had this Iranian general killed, and that caused a considerable sentiment, so to say, in the Middle East. Irmaya also says, as if it is in the Balkans, this murder, but I'm not sure, he says. I cannot see the location clearly. Well, the Balkans are next to the Middle East, so it's not that far geographically. And this civil war in the Middle East is so important for the development of the end time events. First of all, because the people, those who are wise enough to learn from prophecies, will know now it all begins so that they can plan their lives correctly. And also during that civil war, the important figure of the Mahdi will emerge. He will be guided by God, and from the moment of his appearance, it will be about 7 years before the final battle of Armageddon, when Christ will manifest in front of the eyes of the entire world and will finally kill the Antichrist. And it will be exactly this guided by God General the Mahdi, who will be the leader of the United Muslim armies until the day of Armageddon. Armageddon will be a world war, and these United Muslim armies will be just one of the parties involved, and they will be on the side of Christ in the end battle, along with other armies from all around the world. Here in this video they refer to some other old book of prophecies which tells about the Indian army, which will be also fighting on the side of Christ during Armageddon. This 7-year counting from the moment the Mahdi appears on the world stage very well corresponds to the biblical mention of 7 years before the Battle of Armageddon, counted from the time when a peace treaty is signed in Jerusalem by the Antichrist. I can't say at this point if this peace treaty will be a follow-up of exactly this civil war of the three princes, just because there are too many wars during the entire tribulation, and one cannot figure out which one are they talking about. But one thing is sure, after this civil war of the three princes, everything will follow very quickly. Just every few months there will be new calamity, and worse, and more millions will be dying. That's for sure. So when precisely to expect all this unfolding? Probably the most accurate prediction in terms of year comes from Slava Sevrukova, extremely accurate predictions from her. I've been posting in previous videos, and I think I will post more about her personally and why she's reliable. But basically, to remind you, she said that the worst will start sometime after year 2022-25. By then, the borders in Europe will be closed completely. And she said the terrible floods and the rest will start at that time. There is no other prophecy hinting about great floods before the time of tribulation, so she must be referring to the tribulation period. And my most reliable source, set as channeled by Jane Roberts, I always used to quote him that the New Age will start in year 2075, or at least he said by that time really the life conditions will be the way you imagine the New Age or the paradise. But since there are many books by Jane Roberts, what I found recently, because I have not yet read them all, what I just found very recently is even more detailed explanation that the transition period will be long. We are already in the transition period, and there will be few major, so to say, waves of change. And as far as the most powerful wave of change, that time he said, some of my readers will see it, or in other cases, the children of my readers. That prophecy was spoken very approximately some 40 years ago. Now, what did Otrok Vyacheslav say in terms of timings? He did not mention an year. However, he was seeing how his mother will barely resist the temptation to visit one of these concerts of the Antichrist, who will be traveling around the world, and he will convert most of the people of the world to his new devilish religion by showing miracles in these concerts, convincing the people that he is God. And the mother of Otrok Vyacheslav, as of today, could not find her exact age, but I think over 70, or at least definitely over 60. So definitely the time is coming very soon. Baba Vanga from Bulgaria, she was one of the most prominent angels which incarnated recently on Earth. All the material which I could find in English about her prophecies, I was looking for something to recommend, is actually fake. It's a translation of something written years ago by an unscrupulous journalist. But she did not live long ago. We have footage and lots of recordings of her and the testimonies of her friends and the people who lived around her, so we know what she actually said. Since she was completely blind since childhood, the way she spoke showed that she lived very little in the world. We know it, just a little bit. That's why when she spoke, it was as confusing as the Bible, not as confusing as, let's say, Nostradamus, where one barely understands anything. So she spoke a lot about the new earth and the new age, which is coming. So that is sure. She said it many times. It's not something vague or interpretation. Also, she said many times that we should not doubt Christ will be returning. And here, in her final hours before she left this body, she assured us once again, don't be afraid, the great peace is coming very, very soon, just after a couple of years. To people who complained while she was still alive that when is Christ coming? Life is too difficult, everything is going downhill. We have two recorded answers. The first one is wait, Syria has not fallen yet. And at another occasion she replied, you will not see him, your children will see him. And that was foretold a couple of decades ago. Prophecies of Milhaisel also turned out to be extremely accurate because they were made a couple of centuries ago and everything happened exactly as he said, but they are very local, like for his village and region. So about the Third World War, he said, my children won't experience it. The grandchildren as well, and it will be the generation after that that will see it. Well, another mystic was describing the war starting so suddenly that people in the Balkans will be in the restaurants when they will see the tanks coming on the streets. Milhassel tells the same story about his native village. The man will be socializing in the pub, while the tanks will be already crossing the village bridge. This is another prophecy from Germany about the war and the details of the military action match, and this is the timing given at that time in the beginning of the 20th century. Recently I watched this documentary about a living Iranian mystic and prophet who only for a second time in his life allowed to be interviewed on camera. I was greatly impressed by the spiritual depth and power of this man. He does help personally people who manage to reach his hermitage. located in an isolated mountain region, difficult to access. And the interesting thing is that to see the entire destiny of the people who visit him, he uses a small piece of sugar, exactly as Vanga did. She would tell the people to keep a cube of sugar before they come to her, and when they come, she would take it and extract the information from that cube. And as both of them explain, it is because the sugar is type of crystal, and crystals facilitate this exchange and change of energy and destiny. And that's why I'm making also this series of videos on using crystals to modify one's destiny. As far as the future of humanity, according to the Persian mystic, he said fire and dust, ashes await humanity if it doesn't change its ways, which it is not doing. Volcanoes will soon erupt in the east, he said, and then for 5 years it will be getting worse and worse. And indeed, shortly after his predictions were made, we had 2 major eruptions exactly in Asia, in Southeast Asia. And I'm not sure what he meant by dust. Is it the dust of the future volcanoes or the deadly dust, the bioweapons which will be used during the tribulation? That dust will wipe out millions within a couple of days. We had also the unprecedented fires in Australia after his predictions. And when the journalists heard about eruptions, they asked him, will Yellowstone erupt and cause all that? I'm not sure if he knew about Yellowstone. After all, he's a hermit for his entire life. But in reply, he said, I see that the volcano has been dormant for a very long time, and I never see it erupting again. Something else which might be of interest from that documentary was his reaction when they showed him a photo of Donald Trump. He said that during his first term, they will not manage to take him down. However, his second term will be short, he said. That prophecy was recorded before the attempt to impeach Trump. The year before the Great Tribulation, before the Great War starts, or sequence of wars, if we have to be precise, in that year the harvest will be very rich. And in general, the years before that, it will be good. It won't be a disastrous in terms of harvest, and that will be a special arrangement from God, so that people will have time to prepare for the events. After it all starts, there will be 3 years of drought, each one worse than the previous. In the last year will be no rain, actually, and that will be the cause, amongst artificially organized reasons, for the great famine. And this drought will be specially engineered by the Antichrist so that he can prepare the world for his arrival. He will want the people to be hungry when he comes. And he will be rewarding during his short reign on earth the followers of his new religion with rain and good food, while the righteous people will be kept on minimal, extremely simple meals. During the time of the Great Famine, unfortunately, a couple of reliable prophecies make it clear that people will start even eating other people. After, first of all, they eat all the pets they can catch. And also the prophecies of the timing of this drought come from various independent sources, so it seems that's how it will be. So this is a simplified timeline of the beginning of the end by the German prophet. First comes prosperity like never before. Then there is decline in faith like never before. Then unprecedented corruption of morals. We have gone through all that, and even the next one. Then a large number of strangers, foreigners, come to the country, Germany. This has already happened. Then money is losing value more and more. Paramonov also warned that the currency collapse can happen anytime now. The revolution soon follows. There will be such revolutions all over the world. People will be just revolting against the crazy governments. And the Russian Federation attacks Western Europe overnight. There are actually many prophecies about this very, very sudden attack, but it seems more or less to be the same war that starts in the Middle East, because when we go into the details of both this, the Muslim conquest, that eventually leads to the involvement of 80 other nations, almost everybody on earth, so it's not just purely Muslim. This particular invasion of the Russian Federation will be covered in great details in the future episodes, and at that time it will become clear that practically again all the major countries, major world powers are involved, so it could be very well that very same war. This Russian invasion will be organized by the corrupt government of the Russian Federation, of course, and should not be confused with the light which will come from Russia, and as Edgar Cayce specified, but not from the government of Russia, but from the people. That will be happening at somewhat later stage. Well, the invasion itself is described as very short, but reaching all the way to England, and after that it is the army is destroyed with a terrible bioweapon which also kills many millions in Europe. And as far as the Muslim conquest, that will be provoked by these 80 countries who will gather against the army of the Mahdi and will be defeated by it. After the victory of the United Muslim Army, it will continue its march all the way to Istanbul and then Rome. However, most likely that will be also very short-term conquest, because there is no further mention in the timeline about it, or even if it is a long-term one, that would then mean that the authority of the Mahdi is not absolute, because he will be against the Antichrist and he will be revoking the corrupt, cruel laws of the Antichrist wherever he goes. While at the same time we read that in the tribulation period, the Antichrist practically rules the earth through economic and ideological deceit and travels freely everywhere with his hellish concerts, and the only two cities which he will be unable to enter would be Mecca and Medina. And even there he will be prevented by higher powers. It will not be the people who will be able to stop him. The overall impression is that there will be armies throughout the tribulation which will try to fight the Antichrist. However, probably they will be relatively small, because there will be no safe place on earth, meaning somewhere that one could hide from the Antichrist. And even if the Russian Federation invasion and the Muslim conquest are unrelated and different events, ultimately it won't even matter at all, because since this time point that I have marked as War of the Three Princes, until the final Gog and Magog invasion, it will be more or less an uninterrupted chain of wars. Sometimes in this part of the world, then in another, and when there is no war, there will be revolution, in between starvation and natural disasters. And that hellish mixture, that hellish combination will be far stronger in the second half of the tribulation. And the full thing will last about 7 years, marked from the time when the Mahdi appears during the War of the Seven Princes. The Muslim sources say that until the arrival of Christ, it will be about 7 years. But it could be also 8 or even 9, depending on how the events unfold. Some Muslim sources even say 5 to 9 years, because not everything is fixed anyway. But 7 years is the most widely quoted. So we have two prophecies. They are both from Europe about the future currency devaluation. The first one is from Jeremiah. It was at the time when they introduced the Deutschmark. He said, this currency will be okay, but the next one that will come, the euro, beware of that one. He also said that amidst this currency devaluation, the taxation will be so crazy that people won't be able to pay their taxes at all. And interestingly enough, he places that before the Russian Federation sudden attack. So we have to be careful. Also, Paramonov said that now it can happen at any time. And although both prophecies are about the euro devaluation, the world economy is so fragile that most probably it will be same or very similar with all other currencies. However, the other prophecy about the currency devaluation speaks specifically about the time after the Great War. And it is even not sure that he means the first war of the tribulation or the tribulation in general, which will be like one giant war. Now, what kind of devaluation are we talking about? Just for comparison, currently a modest farm in that region of Bavaria is at least 600-700 gold coins, ounces of gold. That's for a modest farm, not a big one. So we are talking of at least 1,000 times currency devaluation. But who knows, maybe the pre-war devaluation will be less, or maybe it won't be less. Maybe that's why people will be rioting. So we have some information on the Antichrist in the Bible and a lot more in the Islamic sources. He will rise to political power despite his young age. He will be in his 30s or so, and his heritage will be that of the Yehud community of Isfahan or the surrounding areas. Few locations in this region are mentioned. Some of them could be places of his power, not necessarily the birthplace. You can use the search engines to find out more about this Yehud lineage. And this devilish figure of the Antichrist, he will not be politically appointed figure and king of the entire world, but practically he will hold all the governments hostage with intrigues and tricks of deceit. He will have physical defects, especially one of his eyes. The other one will be also so he will walk in a crooked way, will not be very tall. But despite his physical defects, he will not be ashamed to claim that he is the Supreme Lord, and will spend most of the time of his reign traveling the world and visiting all the major cities. Utrok Vyacheslav even mentioned what will be the itinerary in his region, and he will be holding these unbelievable concerts. He will be showing miracles with the help of evil spirits, and will manage to convert most of the earth to his new satanic religion. He will have a crowd, entourage of admirers. They will be not only from the Yahud community, but also alcoholics, musicians because of his concerts, all types of low-class people, and women, also often translated as prostitutes. But it could be simply women because his headquarters will be in Jerusalem in the Middle East, and because he will be promising all kinds of freedoms to people. Maybe he will promise some sort of new freedoms to the Middle Eastern women who will support him, possibly. Basically, people who like alcohol and all kinds of strange perversions in life, they will be in ecstasy at that point. They will feel, oh, the new age came and it resonates so much with me, and God Himself is encouraging me. Mostly people will accept the new religion because of hunger. For them it will be practical and pleasant step in life, but they will think, what can I do? I can't eat properly if I don't accept it. Others will accept it to save their business or private property because one won't be able to own or do much without accepting the mark of the beast. Others will be simply bribed to accept it. Anyhow, no matter how one reaches to the bottom of hell, that lifestyle eventually leads to chronic psychological depressions and anger, and these people will become so frustrated and unable to live with their own self that eventually when what is called in a couple of prophecies the secret sects start grooming people so that they can revolt or go to war, the people will buy it and will enthusiastically eventually kill themselves. At different places, the killing will have different form. For example, in Paris, we have the amazing, accurate predictions of Jenny, which are happening already with amazing accuracy, and the utter and absolute destruction of Paris will be done by its citizens, mainly the young people. The media will convince them that the old generation is conspiring against their new happy lifestyle, and there will be this massive revolt, and the organizers of all that, the secret sect, they will also hide large amounts of explosive and will blow everything up once the conflict starts, and they will make such a barricades that the normal people who will try to escape with their cars, they won't be able to do so, and everybody will be simply massacred inside. The government which organizes all that, they will know in advance, and they will even leave for another country. They will simply leave it for the people to kill each other, and will get sure that nobody survives with these additional explosives, and will try to make it look like as if the people organized it all by themselves. I could not find prophecies for each and every country, but I found many references in the reliable prophecies that it will be more or less like this in all lands of the world. Specifically, I found remarks that in England, Russia, and Italy it will be really, really bad. England, I found a couple of references that parts of the country will be completely submerged, like only the top of the church would be visible above the water, and the rest will be simply submerged after being destroyed by wars. And all the points in this video are based only on verified predictions. Most of the points, even on a couple of them, given independently by different people in different lands. They are not based on my own feeling or visions. For that I have other videos. They are not even based on predictions that seem true because they match other predictions. That I don't accept as validation. And as far as Italy, the further south, the worse the destruction. Sicily, it says completely obliterated. It won't even exist as a region anymore. and everything else up to Rome and much further, even Florence, will be destroyed few times by wars which will last years. Lots of destruction in USA, lots of destruction for all coastal cities all over the world. They will be dropping these devilish boxes, some sort of weapons in the water, and when it hits the ocean, a tower of water will rise, and after that it will destabilize the waters all around the world, and they will wipe out the coastal cities. At least 2 times they will be sprinkling terrible bioweapons like powder. One of them will be a strip as wide as half of Bavaria, all the way from the Black Sea to the North Sea. And anything alive, plants, animals, people, will just turn black immediately and deteriorate, fall apart. Nothing living in any form will remain in that strip. And the other incident when something similar is mentioned is during these days of darkness, which will be actually caused by this poisonous powder. Then people should hide in their houses, because anything left outside, if they inhale it, it's over. Or if they eat food that has been exposed to that powder, again, everything is over. Millions will die because of these bioweapons, and all this will be unleashed because of this unbelievable madness and mental fog from the devilish worship. Prague will be also completely annihilated. Also, much of Czechia, current Czech Republic, will suffer total destruction. The scale of massacres in Russia will be unbelievable. Endless riots and revolutions in Central America and everywhere else. And once this period of very roughly 7 years starts, there will be no break, there will be no rest. Things will be coming one after another constantly. There will be no let's maybe have rest for 1 or 2 years. No, there will be no rest at all. Now is the time to make your spirit strong. And not wait for the time of the exam. Exam is not for learning. Exam is for showing what you have already learned. And don't think that if you belong to a given religion, you will be spared, or that it will be a guarantee that you will be making the right choices. No, there is no such thing. Although certain religions or certain religious denominations within the major religions do have the correct view and correct information on what will be happening actually, still everybody says they do have the correct information, and most of the religions will be corrupt and sold and bought by the agents of the Antichrist, and most of the people will be thinking exactly this: I belong to the religion which gives me the right advice. While the reality will be exactly the opposite. The entire madness of approximately 7 years of tribulation will end as suddenly as it started. Not all people will lose their minds and accept the new religion of the pedophiles. There will be wise people, also some of the governments, maybe on local or even state level. They will eventually send armies against the headquarters of the Antichrist, and the final episode will be around Jerusalem, just because that's the location of his headquarters, from where he would be running his worldwide network of ideologically economical deceit. Towards the end of the tribulation, there will be very few men alive on this earth because of the nature of the weapons we are creating for ourselves. The mortality rate of those who go to war will be very, very high. The Islamic sources mention that by the end, there will be only 1 man left for every 50 women. While the European prophets mention that after the ordeal is over, in the first years, The women will be plowing the earth because there won't be any men left. But even under these terrible circumstances, towards the end, the world will be completely polarized, and armies from all over the world will be gathered around Jerusalem. There will be times when it will look as if everything is lost for the wise people. And exactly when it appears that indeed the evil and the Antichrist, the impostor Jesus Christ, has won, and the army of the normal righteous people would be besieged and weakened for a long time without any prospects for winning. At that time, the age of the miracles that everybody can see will start, because during the Great Tribulation, the miracles will be more on individual level, because even in those terrible times, nobody will be made to suffer something that he does not deserve, and angels will be protecting their souls very, very actively. But at the final moment, Christ will openly reveal himself and descend holding two angels. He will descend amongst the army which fights against the Antichrist. Even the exact mosque with white minarets, because all this will be in the Middle East around Jerusalem. Even the exact mosque is mentioned in the Islamic prophecies where that will happen, although it was built much later and did not exist at the time when the prophecies were made. After he descends, they will open the gates of the besieged city, and when the impostor Christ sees the real Christ, he will try to run using black magic, but it will not work for him. This will be almost the end of the tribulation, almost, because at that point a certain nation is mentioned in the Islamic sources, some sort of short people with Asian eyes. They come in great numbers and take over the world. They are ruthless and cruel, and they simply kill everybody indiscriminately on their way. And that's why God will inspire the army of the righteous people, which just defeated the armies of the Antichrist, to hide in a mountain valley, while by a divine will, all of a sudden the armies, the Asian armies, they get some sort of sickness caused by worms, and all of them die together all of a sudden. I also found three independent references by Alexander Paramonov, Barbara Marciniak, and the Islamic sources, that in these final times when the miracles will be witnessed by everybody, actually, even the ordinary people, or at least most of them, will develop also some sort of astral vision themselves. Possibly. Also, the Bible talks about the phenomena called rapture, although those who study the Bibles can never agree when it will actually happen. But it seems that it will happen according to the Bible. And there is something similar in the Islamic sources. There is this mention of this soft, pleasant wind which will take and lift the believers, while the most terrible judgment day will begin on earth, and that will be the worst nightmare of those who have accepted the ideology of the pedophile blood drinkers. And also, Carlos Tanner had a vision of something similar. Good aliens, so to say, but if we use modern terms, they were building already a couple of years ago cities for the wise people who will be taken off the earth during the most difficult times. Will they come back? I don't know. Also, previously I published my own vision of people literally being lifted up in the air while they were chased by the police, the gangsters of the Antichrist. And indeed, they were taken to an extremely beautiful city. So we could be expecting this type of events as well. There will be many other signs. For example, when torrential waters start flowing through this grotto of Saint Francis of Assisi, that means that the calamities for Italy will begin shortly. Also, a miracle takes place every year. Fire erupts from one of the columns in Jerusalem. The year in which the day of the judgment will come, that year the fire will not appear. I'm not sure what will be the situation with news coverage and communications in those days. Also in these two videos there are two more signs from India and Sri Lanka. But I think they will have to be completed before the judgment day and not before the beginning of the tribulation as such. In Israel, the followers of their most famous scholar Rambam Maimun are making elaborate preparations for the end times. For example, they have their own prophecies that a red heifer must be born before the end times begin. Heifer is a young female calf which has not had any offspring so far. So within the premises of their special end times institute, the Temple Institute, they have a special division which has been working on breeding such a cow, because it must be perfectly red. And currently they have two perfect candidates which are all the time checked that not a single white hair has grown, and all other details must be absolutely perfect, because they are expecting and preparing for all the end times details big time. They have also properly identified with extreme research into every detail where is the exact spot where the Battle of Armageddon will be taking place. And when they found it, there were some government buildings, everything was cleaned up in preparation. There is a lot of misunderstanding about the role which Israel will be playing in the end times. Misunderstanding in the West, at least. And the reason for that is that people in the West think that all people in Israel have more or less the same ideology, which is very far from the truth. They have constant violent protests inside Israel. Actually, many groups of people, they cannot, Jewish people, they cannot even live in Israel. They are prosecuted so much. And in the Bible, there is a description that God will hide a handful of Jews. He will lead them to safety in neighboring Jordan. And such a tribe really exists even now in Israel, but that's just one small tribe out of the many. A modern Jewish DNA study, and I underline Jewish, not done by the people who hate the Jews, but done by the modern Jews themselves, they announced the results showing that most of what most people call Jews nowadays have no blood connection with that old tribe whatsoever. Also, certain fragments of the Bible suggest that at the time when the Antichrist will have his headquarters in Jerusalem, he will be supported by some locals, yet others will try to revolt. We also have the Papal Prophecies of Saint Malachi, which were written down centuries ago and contain a list of over 112 popes. And there is a short one-line description of each pope, mentioning something related to his name or place of origin or coat of arms or other important characteristic. So in this list there are so many matches of the popes which actually came to be after the prophecy was written down, that it is beyond any doubt that whoever wrote it really knew things. And according to that prophecy, the current pope is the one who will be leading the people in the times of the Great Tribulation. Well, the current pope is not very young, so yet one more reason to believe that the time is very, very near. There will be more detailed prophecies about the role of the Pope in the episode about Italy, end times in Italy. By the time the Great Tribulation is over, the climate will be much, much warmer. There will be mosquitoes in January in Germany, where also oranges will be able to grow in Germany, which more or less means returning back to the climate as it was in the Middle Ages. This extreme tribulation will end as suddenly as it started, and the new earth after that will be a place of amazing natural beauty. Even animals that are now poisonous will become friendly. Children could freely approach wild lions and snakes and play with them as friends. And as far as the people, Christ, who will be organizing and teaching them after the great change, he will reward them with amazing riches. Actually, in a couple of places I read even unbelievable luxury. This is not my interpretation, it comes from a couple of independent sources. Amazing luxury will be there at that time, although there will be few decades, of course, of transition period during which the earth will have to be cleaned of all the destruction. For example, there was a mention that it will take more than 20 years to clean up all the fallen buildings in Paris. People will not believe in war in those days. There will be no weapons. They will recycle all the weapons and use the metal to make machines for their convenience. But also the era of the machines probably won't last long, because Slava Severukova said decades ago that our decade that begins now will be the time of amazing technological discoveries, while in the next decade people will mostly use the power of their psyche, their thoughts, to power their projects of modifying the reality around. At that time, they will consider the technocratic approach to be primitive. The European prophets saw Christ as coming on white horse from the east. This symbol of the white horse was quite common, and it makes me think even more that Christ is Kalki indeed. See, I have a video about Christ being Kalki. In the prophecies which I found recently, there were again remarks that after all his miracles during the end of the tribulation time, which will be around the time that he is in the middle of his earthly life, as the Bible says in flesh, he will remain amongst the people. He will not just teach them. The prophets say he will show them the original religion. Actually, teachings of the truth is better expression. Religion is not so suitable. He will be teaching the people in that way while living with his wife and children. Some people who emphasize positive thinking will react to everything I said so far by saying these apocalyptic events are not for me. Those who believe in them and meditate on them and give them their power with their thoughts, they may suffer from them. I am not into that, it will not happen to me. Well, just within a short couple of years they will see for themselves that this is not the way things work. And the reasons for that are three. Number one, the thoughts manifest in material events, not immediately like you think it now and in a week it is there in front of you. Sometimes in front of you may appear things that you have thought thousands of years ago. Second of all, positive thoughts doesn't necessarily erase negative thoughts from the past. They may do so in some cases, but not always. And third of all, there is so much confusion of what is actually positive in the modern world that the term has almost lost its meaning. What is positive for one person will be negative for another. Absolute, universal, divine, angelic standards for what is actually positive and good do exist. However, modern people have been in the cobweb of layers upon layers of satanic deceit and distortion of the meaning of the words, and that's why thinking positively has almost lost its meaning nowadays. Exactly as it will be with the destruction of Paris. It will be blown up, leveled to the ground, everybody massacred by gangs of young people who will be convinced within their hearts that they are doing it in the name of love and being happy. The French prophecies come from the nun Jehani, and she predicted not only the exact events of the end times in France, but also what will be happening during this entire period, from her present moment to now, and the end times. So a lot from these prophecies has happened already. They have proven themselves, and it is very unlikely that the rest will not come true as well.